Fisher. I'm actually kind of in an interesting spot because, in addition, I know Norma wanted me to talk about, my mom's house, which is actually foreclosed on 2 years back. It's actually, we didn't even discuss, my grandmother's house was foreclosed on a number of years before that, and we talked about the housing bubble. What's interesting is housing bubble popped nationally in 2008. But around here, we saw that long before it hit nationally. So, on that one was actually, here's a woman that was 75 years old, living on Social Security, with a house that the county auditor said was worth $49,900. And he had people that came to her door, and bear in mind, this woman was blind, couldn't read. That didn't stop them from getting her a contract to, they loaned her, they appraised her house at $80,000. Almost double what it was. And then of course they can loan you more than the appraised value. So they loaned her, it was up over, near $90,000, with a great interest rate, right? Unless you read the fine print. Of course, there's a woman that couldn't read it because she was blind. That interest rate went to 11%, not long after that. On a 30-year mortgage, right? Because, at the age of 105, she finally had that house paid off. But actually, in addition to that, and I mentioned my mother's house was foreclosed on about 3 years ago. If you go and you look on the county auditor's website, you'll see that it still has her name on there. Now, what's interesting is, in addition to, and I told you guys that I'm the new councilman in Ward 5, I spent the last 4 years as a deputy auditor at the Stark County Auditor's Office. Well, one of the jobs that I did, I would get up every day, and when the city of Canton would come in, they'd have to board up a house, or if they had to mow the lawn, or they had to cut the weeds, and everything else, they would put that on the tax bill. Well, guess whose desk that came across? Yours. That was my job. And so, in addition to seeing, of course, we'd see it all over the city. But I occasionally would see my mom's come back through there, and that's funny, she hadn't lived there in 2-3 years, but here's my mom, they said, well, we had to come mow your lawn. Same lawn that I had to mow, by the way, when I was a kid. Now the city's doing it, $400 a crack. Wow. Yeah, because you got to bear in mind, when that grass gets up this high, you can't bring in a gas lawnmower and run through there. You got to bring in the bigger one. Now, here's what, this is, that's all, that's all the local stuff. But I wanted to jump on, and I apologize, I'm going to get in front of the room. There's a couple things on that video that I happen to have some information on that they didn't even go into. They didn't mention a whole lot about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on that video. Now here's what's interesting. We talked about the houses were bailed out by tax dollars, and we all know that was true. Okay, we all remember TARP, troubled assets, fine. Well, here's something you may not have known. Before that case ever happened, did you know that 60% of every mortgage out there, and I guarantee you in working class neighborhoods like Ward 4 and over in Southwest and Ward 5, that's a lot higher than 60%. 60% of those mortgages are guaranteed by the federal government. Yep. $5 trillion. $5 trillion in mortgages are guaranteed by the federal government. It's a great program too if you're a bank. Because as long as you pay your mortgage on time, they get the money. And if you don't, then the federal government takes over the bad debt. That's a great deal. Have someone sign me up for that. That's what I want. I'll loan you money. And if you pay it back, I get the money. And if you don't pay it back, then the taxpayers give me the money. I can't lose. I can't lose. Now, in addition, so I want you to think about that for a moment. 60% of the mortgages out there, if it's a foreclosed house, you already guaranteed the money. You already paid for it up front. Now, when the banks got in trouble, I just looked this stat up. In addition to that bailout, there was $1.2 trillion in Federal Reserve loans that went out to these banks. Now, what's interesting about that is, how the Federal Reserve works, is that I'm going to loan you taxpayer money at 0 or 1% interest, and then you can loan it to taxpayers at 5%, 10%, if you got English credit cards at 30%, 30%, and I'm borrowing it for nothing. And don't worry, if they don't pay it back, the unwitting magnificence of the taxpayer will pay it back for you. So Alan Greenspan, who was on there, said that in his brief departure from orthodoxy in the late 90s, talked about the irrational exuberance of executives on Wall Street. He was wrong about one thing: there was nothing irrational about it. That was completely rational. If you got a system set up where you can pay yourself huge bonuses on borrowed money and know that when it collapses under the weight of your own greed and stupidity, that the full force of the federal government will come and save you in days, if not hours, I'd be pretty exuberant too. So what's interesting is I've solved that on a personal basis with my mom's house, with my grandmother's house. I've seen it come across my desk for years. There's houses out there that literally were, there's a law in the state that if the total amount of liens on a property are greater than the value of the property, then the county will just write it off to nonprofit agency, to city, to the school board. Now, we had properties out there that there were houses that torn down that were $5,000, if that. And we had $30,000 in liens on it. Now, would you go in and pay $30,000 to buy that property? But a lot of times the cities and the townships, they weren't taking those properties anyways, which is really what I think they ought to be doing, is land banking those things. In addition, when we go and we do demolitions, we talk about the city having to pay the demos. Here's something I'll leave with you. You guys notice a lot less demolitions in the city this year than there was last year. You guys notice that? Yes. Last year we knocked down, it was several hundred houses. Well, last year we got $1.1 million to do that. This year they cut that down to $300,000. But they also threw a nice little nugget down the bottom that nobody saw. They changed the regulations now. Used to a building site, if we had a vacant house next door, 1 square block was a building site. So we could only tear down one a year without having to go through all the red tape of testing for lead paint, asbestos, and everything else. On a small house, that was never that big of an issue. You don't have that much asbestos if you do anything. Well, now a building site is the city of Canton. If we knock down more than one house, we have to check every single house for lead, for asbestos. Well, yeah, it's a windfall for the handful of companies that do that. Look in the phone book. There are not that many companies that do asbestos removal. So guess what happened to the cost of doing a demolition? It used to be $4,000 average. Now it's about $7,000 or $8,000 average. Every year, councilmen get to pick a couple of houses to get knocked down. This year, Ward 3, Ward 4, Ward 5, the councilman said, okay, pick your top 3. That's all we can afford to do. We can knock down 3 houses per ward. Now think about Ward 4 where we're at. Drive over and look at Ward 5. Well, I got a lot more. 3 houses, you won't even notice that they're gone. And now if you think we're going to get more money next year, no.
Is this state or federal regulation?
The asbestos is now, that is a state regulation through the state EPA. It's a boondoggle for somebody. Okay, and at the end of the day, that's what you got to remember is people will say that you see complaints on the Occupy Wall Street, the Occupy Canton. We just drove past on the way down. And they go, well, these guys want to take taxpayer dollars and give it to the poor. That's terrible. It's like Stalin just ran for president, right? That's terrible. We're going to take money. Well, what are we doing right now? We're taking tax dollars and we're shifting it up. Okay, when you pay your tax dollars, and what we do is we take that money and we give it to J.P. Morgan Chase to buy that house from. And don't worry, because the house was already guaranteed by Fannie Mae anyways. Okay, we're going to pay for it twice. Then, if you don't take care of it, the city of Canton will take care of it for you. And don't worry about it. We'll just give all that money to you guys. These guys in this room don't need it. Did I take up enough time? Did I take up enough time?
Yes, thank you.
You're going to invite me back.